Great decorating is all about the details, including a gorgeous textured set of coasters. How we love a coaster. Functional. And why not be beautiful? Quince has a gorgeous set of woven rattan coasters in 3 terrific colors with their own little holder that you're going to absolutely love. And if you haven't visited quince.com/DTT yet, get on over there. It's everyday elevated living without the markup. From crisp 100% linen bedding and soft organic cotton towels to airy curtains and premium kitchen tools designed for everyday use. And the best part? Like Quince's clothing, their home goods are half the cost of similar brands. By partnering with top artisans, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Elevate your space with home essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/DTT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/DTT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/DTT. Don't take sides. Hey everybody, it's Kelly Wilkness here with Anita Joyce, and this is Decorating Tips and Tricks. Today we're discussing how to do neutrals right.
You think it's easy, but it's a lot more complicated than people realize.
Thank God we're here, Anita, to help everyone through this. It is harder.
There's so much more to this because I think a lot of people think you just don't add color, but that's not really how to do it right. It's much more than just don't put certain things in, but there's certain things that do need to be there for it to look balanced.
Right. So you need these other elements in there to make the whole neutral vibe work. And we are going to run through a number of things today and give you some examples of doing neutral right. And maybe when you're doing neutral wrong, what things you could be seeing that you need to be fixing. I did find a really beautiful neutral room that I will link in the show notes. And I was looking for bad neutral rooms, and there were so many
was that
of them.
Your search term? Bad neutral? Is that what you looked for?
Pretty much. There were so many bad neutral rooms. So I thought we could just discuss what is a bad neutral room. But if you took out all these tips and didn't do them, that would be a bad neutral room. So let's get to the tips, and so we can help you do it right.
Okay. Well, one thing I think you need to add is stained wood in the room. If you've got a room that's mostly neutrals and a lot of whites, you do not want white painted furniture in there. You need some contrast. So if you're not adding color, you need to add some stained wood. So definitely some wood pieces in there. Go with different stained wood tones. So maybe some darker stained wood and some lighter stained wood.
My overarching tip for doing neutrals right is to pay attention to the undertone. This is so critical in decorating in general, but I think even more important when you're trying to achieve a gorgeous neutral room. The undertone is that subtle color that presents itself underneath the dominant color. So that whether it's a white or a taupe or a beige or any color, even bright colors, every color is going to have an undertone. We've got a number of episodes discussing undertones with regard to choosing paint colors. Think about it with regard to not only paint, but the other elements in the room, fabrics and things like that. So you're either going to choose warm undertone or a cool undertone, and then you're going to stick with it for at least 80% of the room. You can have a small percentage. Doing that math would be about 20% of your room can be a different or the different undertone. So if you went warm, it can be cool, and the opposite is true. But you want 80% of the room to be that one undertone. It doesn't mean that each item has to have the same exact color undertone, but it has to either be in the warm category or the cool category.
Yes, well, I agree with that. This can really be a problem if you're using a very yellow beige with a bright, bright white. Then that yellow beige is going to look very dingy and dirty. So, for example, when we painted a house one time that had a limestone underskirting that had a lot of yellow in it, we went with, I think it was steamed milk. It was a white that had a lot of yellow in it because I knew if I went with a bright white, it was going to really make that skirting look very dirty. So that is something to keep in mind, but do keep in mind that you can mix creams and beiges with white, but keep that in mind. Make sure it's not a bright white and check the undertones as you're saying, because that's when you can get in trouble.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get to that. You really want to be mixing the different tones and shades of neutral colors. But yeah, to your point, when you're saying bright white, I'm picturing kind of like an optic white, which will have a blue undertone.
Yes.
Or purple, lavender, something like that. So a quick way to see what the undertone is, particularly in a white, is hold it on top. So you got your little sample and you put it on top of a white piece of printer paper, and the undertone will become very obvious to you if it isn't already.
Yeah, that is something that you do need to keep in mind. And you're right, because some tend to the blues, lavenders, or the yellows or other shades. So that is something to keep in mind because that can mess up your room pretty quickly. I think another thing to keep in mind is not to just go with white and gray. And I've seen that a lot in clients' houses where they decided to go neutral and it's just white and gray. And if it's a lot of that cool gray and white, the room is really going to look dated. You really need to add something in there. If gray is fine, you can add gray, but don't make that the only other color in the room besides white.
Oh, 100%. That was a lot of the bad neutral rooms that I saw were the gray and white, because people tended, and maybe still tend to, pick a cool gray. So a gray that's got a cool undertone. So it's tending to the blues, and it just comes up cold. And then if you're pairing it with a cool white, that's kind of bad in itself, but worse if you're pairing it with a warm white that's got a little cream or yellow under it. That just looks terrible. The undertones are fighting each other, and there's no way you're going to get a good vibe out of that room if that's happening. If the undertones are fighting, it's not going to work.
That's right. So I certainly would add some warmer neutrals, like a beige or brown, taupes or tan, rather than going with that cool gray. Like you said, you can add in some cool colors if you're going warm, but just do it in a smaller percentage, not 50-50.
We alluded to varying the shades. That is so crucial in a neutral room. That is really going to bring it alive. So if you've got maybe a purish type of white, one that kind of rides that line between cool and warm, but then you've decided to go warm, then you're going to add something that's a creamier white, something that's almost sort of a beigey or sort of a really milky, lovely white. Then maybe a caramelly type of weedy color, something warm and varying shades of the neutral palette. That's going to add depth and interest to the room, rather than having it be that white and gray, like Anita mentioned. You definitely want a lot of shades and tones in the room.
Right. So not only are we talking about just whites and beiges, but you want some other color. I say color. You want some other color in the room, even though it's neutral. So, for example, black goes so beautifully in a neutral room. It is a neutral, but it's going to contrast beautifully with the creams, with the off-whites, with the beiges, and the white. So this is something really nice to add to a room. And I'll include a link. We just did an episode on adding black to a room. And if you want to get a little information about what specific items we're suggesting, I'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely want to have a touch of black in any room, as we recently discussed. And I think metallics in a neutral room are an excellent addition. And I would say use a pop of black and use some metallics. And you can mix the different metals. That works really nicely in a neutral room. So even if you were doing if you went warm, and maybe you're going to do some antique brass or even a shinier brass or a brushed brass, but you could also bring in some pewters. I wouldn't do chrome if you were doing a warmer neutral palette, but you could maybe on the leg of a chair or something like that. That could possibly work, but I would try to stay in the warmer tones in the metals, but you could definitely mix them up.
Very much so. And when you're going with these fabrics that we're talking about, think about fabrics that have a beautiful texture. So you're going to want to think about natural fibers, linen, cotton, wool, maybe even like a faux fur throw. All of these are going to add texture because you don't want everything to have the same exact kind of fiber. For example, if you chose cotton, you don't want every single thing that's fabric in the room to be cotton. You want some other fabrics, velvets even, and perhaps a silk. All of these are going to add some beautiful texture.
Yeah, and texture goes beyond fabrics as well. I want to see a lot of texture in your neutral room, and that is really easy to do and tends to be on the less expensive side. You could add some jute, you could add some sisal, you could add some burlap, you could add some furry pillows. There are so many ways to add texture and heft to the room and make it really inviting. So think about maybe a woven poof. Think about a mohair throw. Think about a furry pillow. Think about adding something, even a basket. Baskets are fantastic. And you know I'm going to want you to have a plant, a nice size plant too, in your room. So that's a great place to bring in the texture too. You can have a really nice woven, like that Kubo hefty, chunky rattan basket for your plant. That would be gorgeous. Stone items too, whether it's actually, you don't necessarily have to have a rock, but you could have a geode, maybe geode bookend, something like that, or a stoneware bowl, something that would feel nice if your hand touched it. It would give some interest. And so it gives that interest to your eye as well. You don't necessarily have to touch the things in a room for your eye to discern the texture. And when your eye picks that up in a neutral room, it's very pleasing.
Yes. And while we're on the subject of these natural elements, what about pottery? There's so many beautiful earthenware items that you can buy that are handmade. And these add so much interest to a room. They're interesting, they're unique, they're one of a kind, handmade. So I think that's a great way to go with pottery. What about adding marble? A marble top table is beautiful. Maybe you have a marble top countertop in the room as well. All of these are going to be great. And another thing to use would be leather. Leather adds another texture to the room. So you could add a leather ottoman. Maybe even it's some books that are bound with leather. But leather in the room is going to really add another beautiful texture.
Oh, yeah. And I love that caramel type of leather, that tone, that warmth, like old saddle type of color. Yes. Oh, that would be gorgeous in a neutral room. Or some black leather could be your pop of black and some texture. But I wouldn't go with a giant black sofa. That's going to take away from your neutral vibe. It's too big, and they tend just not to look that great in general. So I would do smaller touches of black in a more neutral room, not the gigantic sofa.
So true, so true. And I know we're talking neutral, which means no real color. I think this is another mistake people make, not putting any color in a room. Sometimes the room does need a touch of color. I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but I think it's important to add a little bit of color, especially if you didn't use a lot of different tones and a lot of different neutral colors in there. So you can add color in a small way. So if you want it to be neutral, obviously you're not going to do a floral sofa or a bedspread maybe that's in bright colors. But you could add maybe just one or two pillows that have a color, or maybe a few accessories, just something in a small way here or there to add a little bit. And if you really, again, are opposed to anything with too much color, you can go with kind of a washed out color where it's kind of faded, or it's just not that bright. It's kind of more washed out. And I think that's another way. It's going to add a little bit of interest and keep the room from looking too boring, because neutral, if you don't do it right, can be very boring.
Hey, we'll be right back with the rest of the show, but keep listening so we can continue bringing you DTT. I can't stop using dupe.com. This is an amazing website, service, best friend. I absolutely love it. So you find something that you really want and it's too expensive, it's a budget buster. Then you use dupe.com and you can find almost the exact thing or very similar products for much less. So I was crushing on this incredibly gorgeous coffee table. I had it in my mind. I had it in my Pinterest boards. I had it everywhere, but I just didn't have it in my house because it was too expensive. When I learned about dupe.com, that was the first product that I tested. And boy, did I find some amazing dupes. And I purchased one. So the original was almost $3,000. And dupe showed me many choices, all the way down to under $200. Now, you may think something this extraordinary is hard to use, but it's so easy. Just type dupe.com/ before any product URL in your browser, and boom, it instantly finds you less expensive alternatives. They even have an app and a browser extension you can download. No account required, no sign up required. It's completely free. That's completely free free to use. Stop wasting your money on brand names and start saving with dupe.com today. I know people are frustrated by this, if there are people listening that have created these neutral rooms and then you stand back and you look and you're like, like what is wrong here?
Right.
These tips are pretty easy to implement once you've got the foundation of a neutral room. I mean, Anita has talked to us in the past how, she made that transition to a more neutral palette years ago, and started with a red sofa, and she worked her way to her beautiful color palette that she has had and now has in her new home. So that takes some work and some time. But if you've already got the neutral foundation, just figure out, well, which way did I go? Do I have a warm undertone or do I have a cool undertone? And then just continue on that path rather than changing everything up and painting the walls a different color. And then implement these other tips that we're talking about, in particular, the one Anita just mentioned about adding some color. That's your 20%. So whether you're warm or cool in your neutral palette, you can add in the same undertone in a nice color, which it could be pretty bold, but it doesn't have to be. It can be this washed out sort of look, or like it's kind of a muted color. But you could also go the opposite. If you've got a warm room, you could put in a cool color. Like imagine if you had a neutral base that was warm, and you've got some layers of different shades of tones of the whites and the creams and the taupes and all of that. You've got your texture going on. And then what if you added like Wedgwood blue velvet pillows and a Wedgwood blue throw, and maybe you pick up that blue again, even just in like the candle, the outer votive holder of a candle or something like that. That would be stunning. And those three little elements would do so much to elevate that neutral room. I'd want to see this 20% in maybe three small to mid-sized elements in, like, say, a regular size. What is a regular size? I don't know, 14 by 12 or something like that room. If the room is gigantic, you probably want to repeat that 20% color maybe 5 times. And it doesn't have to be the exact same tone or shade of that color either. If the pillows were a little bit deeper, say, I just visioning this blue velvet pillow, and then maybe the throw is a little softer blue, a little lighter color, but you're getting the general feel of that, and that pop or those pops, I should say, around the room are going to create that flow and that cohesion that we really want to see.
You know, what you're saying is so true. I had yellows and reds in my house, mostly maybe some greens. And then I decided to go with neutrals. And when I started doing that, and cooler colors, and those two don't go together. So I started slip covering everything well, I was making linen slip covers for everything in kind of an oatmeal linen, and it clashed. I felt like the direction I was going, I felt like clashed a lot with what I was doing in the past. So there were several months where I think my house looked horrible and the walls were still yellow. And I had, cool tones. It was like a teenage year for my house.
I was going to say it was like junior high for your house.
Like junior high. It was horrible. And then when I finally got rid of all of the red and yellow, I really didn't want a drop of color in my house because it was so painful, especially for me because I made the slip covers. I made the bedspreads. I mean, this was the slow way to do it. I made curtains. So it was so intensive labor-wise that I did not want to add in any color. So when I saw it and it was neutral, I had a hard time adding color because I felt like it took me so long to get here. And I felt it was kind of one of those things where if you add any color, then it's not neutral anymore.
You're going backwards. Yeah.
I felt I had a hard time adding color back in. So it kind of took me a while. And some of my rooms are more neutral than others. I do have the foundational elements in most rooms are neutral, but I have a lot more color in my rooms now. I'm the happiest with the way it looks now. So don't feel odd about adding color into that neutral room. It's going to make it look better if you do it right.
It's a couple of pops. Maybe just try it. Pull something from another room. If you've got a neutral room and you've got some color somewhere else in your house, it doesn't have to be the color. Or it doesn't have to be, the item. But you could just stage it that way, try it, and then just see how that feels to you. Like, what does that do to the room? You can play around in Google too, just like I did. I mean, look at the room that I'm going to link in the show notes and rooms like that have all of these things that we're talking about today going on in the room, and they're neutral. And then you'll find some rooms that are just that white and gray. And you can just, the side by side will be so obvious to you which is working as a neutral space and which is not. Something Anita mentioned a bit ago when we started was wood tones. 100% agree. You want some wood tones in there. It's going to sort of ground your room a little bit too. You don't want it all sort of white and diaphanous and floaty. So some stained wood is great. Lots of times your floor is going to help you in that department as well. But wood accents on furniture, a wooden chair, a wood table, something like that. And you can also mix the wood tones. I wouldn't have too many wood tones in a room. And there are certain ones that are going to work better. I think the darker walnutty looks really great with a neutral room, a lighter room. That sort of golden oak, I wouldn't pick it, but if it's there, you can 100% work with it. The ones that might not work are more the cherries, the stains that have the red undertones. So if you've got a piece in your room that's like that, either just take it out of the room and see how the room feels then, or maybe you want to consider having that refinished, or you could try to paint it just to sort of take that element out, because the red is going to not work very well with the neutrals. The sort of lighter pine works great. The Scandinavian woods, the blonde woods would be really nice.
Yes, all the woods that you're talking about would be beautiful in a neutral room. But like you said, the cherry woods are a little tougher because they're so warm. It is hard to make those work in a room if you've gone with more cooler colors. As we're talking about neutral rooms, you do not have to have a white or beige wall for a neutral room. You can go with a new neutral like pink, taupe, or sage, and those all will work with neutral decor. If you are looking for a white paint for your room, we do have an episode on that. I'll include a link to that in the show notes, where we talk about our favorite white colors.
Interesting. You with the new neutral paint colors. Okay. One that I have been seeing everywhere for it might be even 2 years now, is Farrow & Ball setting plaster.
Mm-hmm.
I am this way and that on that color.
Yes.
It's sort of a Band-Aid-y color, so I'm not really sure about it. It does work in some rooms when you see it in a magazine and it's gorgeous, but I think you'd have to really do some testing to see if it was going to work in your room. But it's a very subtle pink. They also have calamine, like that calamine lotion.
Even the name just is like giving me a really negative reaction.
It makes me itch because that's what my mom would put on me when I got mosquito bites. Those are two to check out if you are thinking about a subtle pink that's kind of taupey and definitely in the neutral family, is Setting Plaster and Calamine by Farrow & Ball.
Another thing to keep in mind as we're talking about neutrals, you're probably picturing solid colors on your pieces that are fabric, like pillows and chairs, and rugs. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be a solid. You can go with patterns, but obviously we're not talking about a chintz with lots of color in it and bright colors. You can do tone on tone. You can do, maybe, a buffalo check in a tan and a white. So you can do things that are patterned, but you want to go with subtle patterns with like a pattern with a neutral in it. And I think that would be something that would really add some interest to the room.
A company that I like to go to for really well-made, muted, neutrally yet interesting pillow covers is Jolie March. And we could link that in the show notes. She makes beautiful pillows. The backs are usually this oatmeal-y cotton, and it has kind of a chunky gold zipper, antiqued brass, I should say, not really gold. And then the front maybe will be a soft pink with very slight little flowers, or maybe just a little geometric design with a blue background. Also has lots of tans and taupes. So that's a great place to have a look, to get some ideas even for adding some interesting color and slight pattern to a neutral room.
What about a neutral wallpaper or even a mural? I've seen a lot of beautiful ones done in black and whites, or even kind of a sepia and white. So all of these would go so well. But again, I think you can have some artwork with a little bit of color in it, and maybe just nothing too big and splashy if you're trying to kind of keep everything kind of toned down.
And let's not forget animal print. You can even go with a bolder animal print, a black and goldish color combination, if it's just a couple of pillows, and then you're pulling the black out of that and you've got some black elements in the room. That can be stunning and so effective in a neutral room. You would still call it a neutral room because this is maybe even less than the 20%. It's maybe 10% of what's going on in the room, but that's going to be the pop that really grabs you and makes the room really interesting. And of course, there are so many neutral fabrics and wallpapers and things like that that are not necessarily the natural colors of a cheetah or what have you, but maybe they're gray and white, or even a lavender and a white, or a blue and a white mix. But the design is an animal print. That can work to great effect in a neutral room.
I love animal prints. So I'm so excited they're back.
Oh, yeah. They never left.
For some people they did, but yes, you're right. They should never have left for some people, but they did. And you're right. They have in a way been around.
So how can you do a neutral room the wrong way? You leave it, you don't pay attention to us, what we told you today, and then it's going to be boring. But it can be just flat and uninteresting. There's just nothing going on. Everything's just kind of, you need a little something going on. And any of the things that we talked about today, even if you just did one or two of them, is going to make a big difference in a neutral room that you've already done. And if you're starting from scratch, well, that's really exciting. So my suggestion is, start with the undertones of your colors and then go from there. Get lots of swatches, play around with it, and have fun with it. A neutral room does not need to be boring at all. but it is a lovely way to live. It's relaxing. You're doing what we're talking about today. It's really inviting. I joked in the beginning about not taking sides, but you really kind of do take a side when you go neutral, because it's not just this middle ground. It's not just the lack of color. It has to have all these other things in there. So it's just not sort of riding the middle between a really colorful room and a room with basically nothing in it. It is a design in of itself that you have to curate to get it really done correctly.
That is true. It is, like we said, it is very easy to mess this up. There are a lot of moving parts, even though there's not a lot of color, but there is some. And there's a lot of things that you need to be even more mindful of adding, since you don't have the interest of the color in there. So yes, I think, the texture, the wood, stone, all the things that we've talked about, I think are very key in pulling together a neutral room.
Did you all hear in our last episode that we're doing something super fun for the month of May? So you have the opportunity to get your question answered, your decorating question, but I guess you could ask us any question, but let's stay with decorating. Anita and I will answer your questions in an upcoming episode. All you need to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcast, and in the last sentence of your review, state your question. And we will get to it in an upcoming episode. You need to get your review in with your question included in it during the month of May. And it needs to be left on Apple Podcasts. So that's super easy to do. So we're looking forward to your questions, and we're looking forward to answering them for you.
We are defining Ormolu. And true Ormolu is a technique that involves mercury or fire gilding. So first, the gilders used a mixture of mercuric nitrate to cover copper, brass, or bronze, typically bronze objects. Then they added a finely powdered mixture of high karat gold and mercury to a bronze item. Next, they fired the object in a kiln with very high temperatures to vaporize the mercury, leaving only the gold finish. And I'm sure if you've ever looked at antiques, you've probably seen Ormolu on a piece of furniture. When it's finished, it results in a very highly luxurious ornamental mounting for furniture or a decorative object. But I'm sure you picked up on what I said. There is mercury in the process. So this was very dangerous for the people doing the gilding process. And because mercury is so incredibly poisonous, the life expectancy of these gilders was about 40 years. So talk about the Mad Hatters. I mean, this would kill you too.
Oh my gosh.
So, in France, they did pass laws eventually banning the use of mercury, but it did remain a common material for cabinet makers until the 20th century. So when they banned the use of mercury in the production of Ormolu, that was around the time that electroplating was patented. And with this technique, they layered metallic objects with gold to get a lustrous finish object. And electroplating is much more affordable, as you might guess, than traditional true Ormolu, and it's a lot more safe for the people doing the work. And that is what we defined today. So I'm sure you've seen these pieces. They're really beautiful, and I didn't realize what was involved in making it until I did a little research.
My crush today is the Parnassus Bookstore YouTube channel. They are now including their conversations with authors that they often have at the bookstore, which if you live in Nashville or in the environs, you could go to in person. But as for the people that don't, and if you'd like to see Ann Patchett, the owner or co-owner of Parnassus Bookstore and a celebrated author herself, interview various authors and talk about their books, then you should tune in to their YouTube channel, and we'll have a link in the show notes.
Oh, wow. That sounds fun. Yes, I'd rather go there in person. Let's book a flight. So my crush are some really charming pillows that I found on Amazon. And I'm always surprised when I find nice pillow covers because there's so many bad ones on there. But these are really nice. They're 100% cotton. They're pink with a scalloped edge, and that has a nice wide blue embroidered edge that follows that scalloped edging on the pillows. And the price was nice too. So I got a set of two for $25, and the price does vary depending on which size you get. I got 18 by 18-inch pillow covers, and they look really charming. And yeah, I was really surprised, but they look very nice.
Oh, they sound adorable. I just love a scallop. I know scallops came on hard. They're just great.
It's classic. Like you said, it never goes out of style.
It really doesn't, unless you're going too crazy. Those scallop lampshades just make my heart flutter. I still haven't done it, and I haven't gotten one, but I really still want to. And so if you don't go too hard with the scallops, I think it's great. These sound wonderful. And usually on Amazon, they have a variety of colors. Do they have other options?
They had several colorways. Yes, there was kind of a really pretty red, and there was, I think, a coral, yellow, beautiful green, several options, and yeah, some really nice options.
So fun for spring and summer. And imagine that with maybe a gingham. Picking up one of the colors behind it would be just so adorable, like on a porch or something like that. Thanks for that one. I'm definitely going to check it out when the show notes come out.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. And I hope we gave you some great tips for going neutral in your home. And remember, we're here to inspire you to create a beautiful home. Until next time.
Want to talk to us? Well, we really want to talk to you. So let's schedule a design consult. Anita and I are here to give you individualized, actionable advice on how to create the beautiful home you want and deserve. It's so easy to schedule a design consult with us. Simply click the link in the show notes or head to decoratingtipsandtricks.com/consult. When we talk to you on the scheduled time, we will be ready with so many great tips, advice, and yes, tricks. So sign up today for a design consult. We can't wait to talk to you.